I should have known something was wrong when my mother-in-law, Barbara, insisted on helping us bring in the presents. My daughter Emma had spent 3 months creating personalized gifts for all 23 family members attending the big 60th birthday celebration. At 12 years old, she had poured her heart into each creation, determined to make her grandmother's birthday special. "Oh, let me handle those boxes," Barbara said with that artificial sweetness I'd grown to distrust over the past 15 years. "They look homemade. We wouldn't want them to clash with the elegant party setup." I watched her perfectly manicured hands grip the storage container holding Emma's gifts, trying to ignore the slight grimace on her face as she noticed the hand-decorated wrapping peeking through. "They're special presents from Emma," I explained, though I knew it wouldn't matter. "She's been working on them since summer." Barbara's tight smile didn't reach her eyes. "How creative. I'll just put these somewhere safe until it's time to open gifts." That should have been my first warning sign. In the decade I'd been married to her son David, Barbara had never voluntarily helped with anything that didn't directly enhance her image as the perfect society matron. The party venue was exactly what you'd expect from Barbara Matthews: crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, and a guest list that read like a who's who of local society. Never mind that half these people barely spoke to her outside of charity functions. Image was everything in Barbara's world. Emma tugged at my sleeve as we watched her grandmother disappear with her gifts. "Mom, should I show Grandma which present is hers first?" I made her something extra special. My heart ached looking at my daughter's hopeful face. Emma had inherited her father's optimistic nature, always believing the best in people. Even after years of subtle dismissals and forgotten dance recitals, she still tried so hard to win her grandmother's approval. "Let's get settled first, honey," I said, guiding her toward the family tables. "Grandma's busy greeting guests right now." The next hour passed in a blur of forced small talk and barely concealed judgment. Barbara's friends excelled at delivering compliments that felt like paper cuts. "Oh, Emma's in public school. How brave of you to make that choice." "Sarah, dear, that dress is so unique. I saw something similar at Target last week." I kept one eye on the gift table, noticing that Barbara hadn't returned with Emma's presents. When I tried to ask her about them, she was mysteriously always in the middle of an important conversation. It wasn't until I excused myself to use the restroom that I saw it. Through the venue's back window, I spotted Barbara's designer handbag sitting near the dumpster. Something colorful caught my eye, a corner of familiar wrapping paper peeking out of the industrial trash bin. My hands shook as I rushed outside. There, among coffee grounds and wilted flowers, lay Emma's carefully crafted presents. 3 months of work, tossed away like garbage before anyone could even see them. The hand-painted photo frame she'd made for her Uncle Tom. The carefully knitted scarf for her cousin Sarah. The special memory book she created for Barbara herself, filled with family photos and handwritten stories. I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything, my hands trembling with rage. As I photographed the discarded gifts, a memory surfaced. Last week's conversation I'd overheard between Barbara and her country club friends, accidentally captured on my phone when I was recording Emma's choir practice. "Can you imagine?" Barbara's voice had dripped with disdain. "My son married a kindergarten teacher, and now my granddaughter is turning out just as common. Always making things instead of buying proper presents like civilized people." I hadn't confronted her then, trying to keep the peace for David's sake. But standing there, looking at my daughter's destroyed hard work, something snapped inside me. Back inside, I found Emma demonstrating her latest dance routine to her cousins, blissfully unaware of her grandmother's betrayal. Barbara stood nearby, holding court with her friends, probably congratulating herself on averting the embarrassment of handmade gifts at her sophisticated soiree. "Mom," Emma waved me over excitedly. "Is it time for presents yet? I can't wait to show everyone what I made." The room suddenly felt very small. I looked at my daughter's shining eyes, then at Barbara's smug smile, and knew this moment would define our family's future. I could stay quiet, make excuses about lost gifts, and let Barbara win again. Or I could finally stand up for my daughter and show everyone exactly who Barbara Matthews really was. "Actually, sweetie," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I need to talk to Grandma about your presents. I just found something very interesting in the dumpster outside." Barbara's perfectly painted face went pale. "Sarah, dear," she cut in quickly, Perhaps we should discuss this privately. I pulled out my phone, opening the photo gallery. Oh no, Barbara. I think it's time we had a very public discussion about how you treat your granddaughter's gifts. And while we're at it, maybe we should all hear what you really think about your common family members. The elegant party was about to become something very different indeed. After 15 years of swallowing Barbara's subtle cruelty, I was finally ready to serve some truth alongside her overpriced birthday cake. The silence that fell over the party was deafening. Barbara's perfectly composed facade cracked as I held up my phone, showing the first photo of Emma's gifts tossed carelessly into the dumpster. Would anyone like to see what a 60-year-old woman does with presents made by her 12-year-old granddaughter? I swiped through the photos slowly, making sure everyone could see. Here's the hand-painted jewelry box Emma made for Aunt Susan. Oh, and look, the family recipe book she spent weeks copying and illustrating for Cousin Beth. Sarah, David appeared at my side, his voice low. What's going on? Before I could answer, Barbara launched into damage control mode. Oh, there must be some misunderstanding. She forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. I was simply reorganizing the gifts. You know how cluttered these parties can get. In the dumpster, Mom? David's voice had an edge I'd never heard before. You're reorganizing gifts in the dumpster. Emma pushed through the crowd, her face falling as she saw the photos on my phone. Those are my presents. Her voice was small, confused. Grandma, why are they in the trash? Barbara's eyes darted around the room, taking in the horrified expressions of her carefully cultivated social circle. Emma, darling, it's not what it looks like. I was going to? Going to what? I cut her off, pulling up the video on my phone. Pretend they got lost? Like you pretended to be busy every time Emma had a school performance. Or maybe you'd like to explain what you meant when you told your friends about your common family members. The color drained from Barbara's face as her own voice filled the room. Did you see what she brought to the Easter brunch? Homemade cookies, on my antique serving plates. I swear, that girl has no understanding of proper society. Just like her mother. No class, no breeding. Turn that off. Barbara lunged for my phone, but David stepped between us. No, Mom, his voice was steel. I think we all need to hear this. I've spent years making excuses for how you treat my wife and daughter. Not anymore. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You really hate my presence that much, Grandma. The party guests shifted uncomfortably, watching the perfect Matthews family image shatter. Barbara's sister Carol stepped forward, picking up one of the photos from my phone screen. Barb, this is beautiful work, she said, examining the image of Emma's handmade photo album. How could you throw this away? She's your granddaughter. You don't understand, Barbara's voice rose hysterically. I have a reputation to maintain. What would people think, having handmade gifts at a sophisticated event like this? We think, one of her country club friends spoke up, that you just threw away something more valuable than anything in this overpriced party. David walked to the dumpster and began carefully retrieving Emma's gifts, dignity be damned. His perfectly pressed suit got stained with coffee grounds as he rescued each handmade treasure. Mom, he said when he returned, setting the salvaged presents on the main table, every time I convinced Sarah to give you another chance, she told me people don't change unless they have to. I didn't want to believe my own mother could be so cruel. Cruel? Barbara's voice cracked. Everything I do is to maintain our family's social standing. These tacky handmade things are worth more than every piece of designer garbage you own. I finished for her. Emma, honey, would you like to show everyone what you made? My daughter hesitated, looking at the rescued gifts. They're all dirty now. They're perfect, David said firmly, pulling out the memory book Emma had made for Barbara. Just like you. As Emma began showing her cousins the careful details of each gift, explaining the thought behind every choice, I watched Barbara's carefully constructed world crumble. Her society friends whispered and gathered their belongings, making polite excuses to leave early. You've ruined everything, Barbara hissed at me, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Years of social standing, destroyed because you had to make a scene. No, Mom, David said quietly. You ruined it. Every time you chose your image over your family, every time you made my daughter feel less than perfect, every time you treated my wife like she wasn't good enough. The party dissolved into awkward departures and hushed conversations. Barbara's sister Carol stayed, helping Emma clean her salvaged gifts and listening intently as my daughter explained each one's significance. As the room emptied, Barbara stood alone by her elaborate birthday cake, everything she valued slipping away with each departing guest. Her perfectly planned party had become the talk of her social circle, but not in the way she'd intended. "I think it's time we left," David announced, gathering Emma's presence. "Mom, when you're ready to apologize, really apologize. You know where to find us." 3 weeks passed after the party disaster. 3 weeks of silence from Barbara, though the family grapevine buzzed with updates. She canceled her country club membership, stopped attending her weekly bridge games, and hadn't been seen at her usual salon appointments. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, a small package arrived at our door. Inside was a faded cardboard box, its corners soft with age. On top lay a handwritten note in Barbara's elegant script. "I found these in my attic. I think I finally understand. May I come over to talk?" The box contained handmade gifts, dozens of them. Birthday cards with wobbly letters, painted rocks, macaroni art, and a particularly memorable attempt at a clay ashtray. All made by David as a child, each one carefully preserved by a younger Barbara who once knew the value of a child's love. "Mom," Emma called from the kitchen, where she was still creating despite everything. "Someone's at the door." Barbara stood on our porch, looking smaller somehow without her designer clothes and perfect makeup. She carried a large shopping bag and couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Before you say anything," she began, her voice rough, "I need to show you something." She pulled out a photo album, not the expensive leather-bound kind she usually favored, but a handmade one with uneven corners and slightly crooked photos. "My mother made this," she explained as we sat in a living room. "I found it the same day I found David's old gifts. I've spent weeks looking at it, remembering how proud I was to give her those terribly made presents, how she displayed every single one." Emma joined us, carefully keeping her distance from her grandmother. "What happened to you, Mom?" David asked softly. "When did appearances become more important than actual family?" Barbara's hands trembled as she opened the album. I think it happened so slowly I didn't notice. Each social climb, each new circle, each perfect party. I kept reaching for more until I forgot what I was leaving behind." She turned to Emma, tears falling freely now. "I found your memory book in that box of rescued gifts. I read every page, every story you wrote about our family. You saw good things in me that I've forgotten were there." Emma's voice was quiet but steady. "I just wanted you to love my presents like Mom keeps Dad's old ones. She has a whole box of things I made, even the really bad ones from kindergarten." "I have a box like that too," Barbara admitted. "I just buried it, along with a lot of other things I shouldn't have forgotten." She reached into her bag again and pulled out a familiar-looking book. Emma's handmade recipe collection, carefully cleaned of dumpster stains. "I wondered if you'd help me make some of these recipes, properly this time, in my kitchen. All of them, even the messy ones." Barbara's carefully controlled voice cracked. "I'd like to learn how to be the grandmother you deserve." David took my hand, squeezing it gently as we watched Emma consider her grandmother's offer. "Will you still care what your friends think?" Emma asked bluntly. Barbara shook her head. "I've lost most of them anyway. Turns out, when you build relationships on appearances, they disappear as soon as your image cracks." She smiled sadly. "But family, real family, stays even when you're at your worst. At least I hope they do." Emma studied her grandmother's face for a long moment. Then she stood up and left the room without a word. Barbara's shoulders slumped, but before she could speak, Emma returned with her craft supplies. "I saved all the patterns and extra materials," she'd announced. "We could make new presents, better ones, while the cookies bake." The tension in the room broke as Barbara let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "I'd like that very much." Later that evening, as Barbara and Emma sat surrounded by craft supplies and the smell of slightly burned cookies, I found David watching them with an odd expression. "You know what this reminds me of?" he said softly. "Those Sundays when I was little, before Mom got involved in the country club scene. She used to spend hours doing crafts with me, never caring about the mess." I watched as Barbara proudly held up her decidedly amateur attempt at a friendship bracelet, Emma patiently showing her how to correct a mistake in the pattern. "Sometimes," I replied, "people just need to be reminded of who they used to be. The path to healing wouldn't be smooth. Too many harsh words and hurt feelings to be erased in a single afternoon." but watching grandmother and granddaughter bond over burnt cookies and tangled embroidery thread, I saw something more valuable than all of Barbara's designer handbags. The beginning of a real relationship built on love instead of appearances. And on our mantle, in a place of honor, we placed both albums. The one Barbara's mother made decades ago and Emma's newly restored creation, reminding us that sometimes the most precious gifts don't come from expensive stores, but from hands that love us enough to make something special.